dear friends, surely many of you know how children are created, certainly not in detail. What do you think is important for conceiving a child? If you are interested in this topic, watch this video. I'm Dr. Olena Berezovska and I welcome you to my YouTube channel. Today I will tell you what the process of conception is, what role sperm and eggs play, about follicogenesis and maturation of eggs. So, what determines the production of offspring, the occurrence of pregnancy? To conceive a child in the body of a woman, female sex cells, eggs, must mature. Male sex cells, spermatozoa, must be produced in sufficient quantities as well. Since conception occurs in the fallopian tubes, there must be passable at least one of them. The fertilized egg must travel through the fallopian tube into the uterine cavity. The uterus must have a mature endometrium to allow the embryo to attach, which we call implantation. It seems so simple, but any breakdown at all these levels of procreation can lead to the absence of pregnancy. Let's talk a little about spermatozoa. They mature for approximately 74 days in the testicles of males. This does not mean that this process is intermittent. On the contrary, mature spermatozoa appear every day. Every day a new portion of sperm is produced in which there are spermatozoa. Every healthy man produces up to 100 million spermatozoa every day and every second up to 1500 spermatozoa. In one portion of sperm ejaculate, only 10% of spermatozoa will be activated. Their mobility will become more progressive, which is important for conception. With insufficient sperm count, the number of active spermatozoa may be small. I won't go into detail about spermatozoa in this video, as I will discuss reproductive issues in other videos. Now let's talk about eggs. It is with the egg and its maturation that the process of conception begins. A woman receives all the eggs, what we call gametes, at the time of her conception, when she is inside of her mother's uterus. This happens in the first days of the life of the embryo. The same can be said about the male sex cells or male reproductive cells. We call the cells primary gametes. During life, the cells are lost. In a female, the number of primary gametes determines her ovarian reserve. Scientists know little about the stock of gametes in males since this topic has not been studied much, but the ovarian reserve is being studied by many scientists and researchers. There are several peaks or waves of rapid egg loss in any woman's life. Women do not have gradual egg loss. This is an ongoing process, but it has periods of accelerated loss. The first wave of a rapid gamete loss occurs at 20 weeks of fetal life in a girl, or in other words, at 20 weeks of her mother's pregnancy. If in the first weeks of her conception a girl has 7–10 million eggs in each ovary, then by 20 weeks of pregnancy there are 2 million of them. You can imagine what a colossal amount of loss of primary gametes there is. Immediately after the birth of a girl, the second period of accelerated death of gametes occurs. The fact is that the placenta produces a huge amount of hormones. It is the placenta and not the mother that provides the fetus with all the necessary hormones. After birth, the baby has no contact with the placenta, so all her hormones drop sharply too. This stimulates the growth of primary gametes, but since there is no hormonal support, they begin to die intensively. Even if it sounds too dramatic, it does not harm the girl's health and does not affect her reproduction in the future. About 1.5 million eggs remain after this wave of the loss. The third wave of accelerated egg death occurs during a girl's puberty, usually at the time of the first menstruation. About 400,000 eggs remain in each ovary after puberty is completed. Pay attention to such a big difference in the number of oocytes, from 2 million to 400,000. The death of the eggs continues through life. After age 35, the process of egg loss increases, but the peak or fourth wave of accelerated egg loss occurs at 38-39 years of age, the mature reproductive age. When a woman begins planning a pregnancy, usually after the age of 25, there are about 25,000 eggs in each ovary. It seems that the reserve is not bad, but with each menstrual cycle, a woman loses about 50-70 eggs, and maybe more. Usually only one egg matures, and not in every cycle. All eggs are in special vesicles, which we call follicles. The maturation of an egg from a small invisible follicle to a 20 mm follicle, when ovulation most often occurs, takes more than 180 days. This process is called follicogenesis. It is not known exactly how many days it takes for follicles to mature, but 180 days is 6 months minimum. If during this period some factors affect the maturation of the follicles, the negative effect may not be visible immediately, but after a few months. At 38-39 years old, the last accelerated death of eggs occurs, as I said. When up to 1,000 eggs remain in the ovaries, menopause occurs. The reproductive function of a woman stops. Unfortunately, most women are unaware of this age and ovarian reduction limitations. At menopause, the ovaries contain single follicles that cannot always be seen with ultrasound. Let's talk more about follicogenesis, because now it is very fashionable to measure the size of the follicles by ultrasound, but there are not always indications for this. There are even commercial names, fertiliometry for example. An ultrasound cannot determine a woman's fertility rate. Often this is a banal extortion of money from a worried woman who is provoked to use reproductive technologies. Some women spend several months and even a whole year on follicometry, which is wrong. My other videos will be about infertility. So, follicogenesis is the process of maturation of eggs in the ovaries. This is a long process. There are several steps in this process, but not all of them depend on hormone level or are controlled by hormones, in particular pituitary hormones. Only the last weeks, usually 2 weeks, when the dominant follicle is formed, passes under the influence of pituitary hormones. These features of follicogenesis is used, for example, to stimulate ovulation in reproductive medicine. When a woman goes through menopause, we know that the ovaries may contain a certain numbers of small follicles that are not visible on ultrasound. However, it is impossible to get ovulation in such women even with the help of hormones. In other words, follicles must be of a certain size to be sensitive to hormones. Therefore, it is not always possible to obtain enough eggs for IVF. Also, because of this, women in menopause particularly do not become pregnant. Also, there are casuistic cases of pregnancy at this age. So remember the following. 99% of all follicles that a woman receives at her conception will die during her life. These are not scary numbers. This is the norm. Don't be afraid of it. 300-400 ovulations occur in a woman's lifetime. If we subtract the periods of pregnancy and lactation, as well as rare anovulation due to stress, for example, and for other reasons. If a woman takes hormonal contraceptives, there is no ovulation either. But this does not save the ovarian reserve. The eggs are constantly dying. Theoretically, a woman could become pregnant almost 300 times if conception occurred in every cycle. But eggs can be of a poor quality in some cycles. A woman does not always have a sexual life, and the level of conception also depends on the quality of sperm. I will not go into detailed description of follicogenesis. Also, it is a very interesting process. I will talk a little about ovulation. Ovulation is not follicogenesis. It is not the maturation of eggs. This is the completion of follicogenesis when a mature egg leaves its place of residence, the follicle. In other words, ovulation is the release of the egg from the follicle, and this process lasts about 6 minutes or a little more. In this case, the follicle does not disappear anywhere. It fills with blood and hemorrhagic body appears. This is the first stage in formation of the corpus luteum. The follicular fluid, that is the fluid that in the follicles during the maturation of the egg, pours into the abdominal cavity, but most of it enters the nearby fallopian tube, where the egg continues its journey to meet the sperm. This liquid contains high concentrations of hormones, especially progesterone, and serves as a kind of signaling device for spermatozoa. The hemorrhagic body usually exists for 24 hours or a little more. Its presence confirms the occurrence of ovulation. The corpus luteum does not always indicate that there was ovulation. The ovaries never ovulate in a fixed sequence. Nature has its own order. Most often, ovulation occurs in the right ovary, usually in 67% of cases. This is due to the better blood supply of the right ovary. But it does not matter in which ovary ovulation occurs. It is important that there is ovulation as such. Ovulation can be several months in a row in one ovary. This is the norm. This does not mean that the second ovary is not working. Even if for some reason one ovary remains, it usually takes over the reproduction function, and the cycles can be regular for a long period of time. We will talk about the secret of the conception in another video. Follow the post, don't forget to like my video, and subscribe to my channel and Instagram page. More information about my other pages is in the description of this video. See you soon!